But good morning and good afternoon and good evening, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. So we are here today to actually launch the performance evaluation cycle and review. We know that most of you are very familiar with the process, but we thought to do this review introduction, help a little bit of an info session with you today. Last week we had the session with the supervisors, and this week we have the session with all of you. What I want to remind is that this session is for all people under CIMMYT, people that are hosted under different centers. I'd say this is a good information session, but this will not apply to you. So, however, for anyone who attended the session last week in terms of supervisors, you might have people under hosted sessions or hosted centers or not. So just wanted to remind so that there is no confusion for people that are hosted under different centers and not CIMMYT. So what we're going to do today, I'm not on my own. I'm not going to be the one talking for most of the presentation. This is going to be Daniel and Deepu. So Daniel, you know him. He's been managing the performance management cycle for a few years now. I don't know how many years, but a few years at what I would like to share. And Deepu is a new face for everyone, most probably. He's our new head of talent management, and he joined us back in September, and he's working very closely, obviously, with Daniel to drive this performance review 2025. So today, what we would like to do, we have a few purposes today. Is first of all to clarify the steps and the actions and deadlines for this cycle. As you will see, we have an ambitious agenda, an ambitious timeline. So they will go through that timeline with you so that to explain every steps with the goal, and then you know that performance reviews have been, at times go way beyond the month of March of the next year. But this year, the target is that we will be closing this process by the end of March. So we need to all put our efforts to make sure that this is successful with this timeline. The second part of the session today will be to learn how to highlight your contributions and set objectives and connect with the CIMMYT priorities. And we will also, and the team will give you some tips and tools to turn your, performance into development dialogue. So a little bit of some changes this year. Again, they will go through that with you and bring some clarity on the expectations as well. There is a couple updates that we have, some new expectations as well. So it's important that you know so that you're the best prepared for going through the cycle. So without further ado, I'm going to let Daniel and Deepu take over. And I will be here throughout the sessions to answer any questions that you might have at the end and or jump in whenever needed. Thank you. Over to you, Daniel and Deepu.
Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you for the introduction. And basically, I'm just going to recap what actually Sabrina has mentioned to you. So as we approach the end of the year, right? So we all know what's coming, right? Performance evaluation. So for many of us, as Sabrina has mentioned, you already know the steps, right? So, and it can look like it's a long checklist to complete. And sometimes, to be honest with you, sometimes a bit of headache, right? So we need to complete all these steps, and we go through those steps to complete the performance evaluation. But our mission today is not to walk you through the process. Again, you already know the steps, but we want to focus on how you can do the performance review and why is it important, right? We want to share with you practical tips to write your self-assessments. At this stage, draft your objectives for next year. And actually something that we're going to introduce today, and that's how we are going to be driving this cycle. The ways you define development goals, that's actually a new term that we're using in this year's cycle so that we can move forward. So we are going to share ideas to turn what it feels a mandatory task, right? So like the performance evaluation meeting into hopefully a conversation on staff development. So basically that's our mission. And the purpose of the session, basically it would be getting to know the actions, the steps, the deadlines that you have, how to write your self-assessment, how to have one-to-one conversation. And by the end of the session, you will see how all these fit into what we want to achieve, development objectives and goals. So that let's achieve this man into just a mandatory task into start building our own development. That's actually why we're using the Legos thing, right? So as we go to the presentation, we would like to think of the session as building a Lego, right? So all the pieces fits together into a structure. So let's get into it. And the timeline overview, right? So the whole process breaks down into three main phases. The first phase is the self-assessment and first level conversation. The second phase is the first and second level review and calibration. And the last phase is the leadership review and calibration. So basically, the first month from now and to December 15, we are going to have two milestones. One of them is the completion of the self-assessment and the performance conversation, so that when we reach Christmas, and that's actually something that Sabrina says, we have ambition goals, because so that when we reach Christmas, you actually can enjoy those holidays, right? So that's the goal. Then we have the first and second level review and calibration here is up to you supervisors to meet, calibrate ratings, take a holistic view, look at the overall contributions and team impact, not only individually, but collectively. And lastly, the leadership review and calibration, your management will ensure, again, with this Lego analogy, all the pieces fit into the structure. So those are basically the whole process, three main phases. The first one is the self-assessment, the first level supervisor discussion, and this should be completed before Christmas, December 15. Then phase two, we are going to concentrate on the second level supervisor review and calibration and department review. And after that, we are going to, or the leadership will focus on the review calibration, looking at a whole. So for these sessions, the key actions for you as a staff member. So we are going to concentrate on the first phase and the immediate step that is now. Two days ago on our week, you saw the rollout communication of performance management. And you, as the staff member, are the primary builder and designer of this component. And then you have to complete the self-assessment, right? In the self-assessment, which happens in a staff evaluator, and also in this first phase, you need to have the one-to-one meeting conversation with your supervisor. Again, this is to be completed by December 15. And how are you going to do this, right? So this is important. Now, I will go to the next step. Oh, sorry, the next slide here. So how are you going to complete this? So, and why is this timeline? We would like you to reflect on the work that you have done, the achievements, and the challenges before holidays. Again, we believe that doing so, you will reflect your achievements in a better way instead of remember next year, oh, what did I did last year? And so you will have your fresh mind. And to do so, we have 4 main pillars. So the first pillar is to reflect on your achievements. So you have to start collecting data. You have to start using reports, what you have done, collect feedback, right? So then you have all the accomplishments that you have done. And also you see how they align with your objectives. The second pillar on writing your self-assessment is not only reflecting on achievement, but also identify challenges. Here, what we aim is that we always face challenges when actually in our work. But the key part or the key component here is that you have to express, to document how you overcome those challenges, right? What was the learning curve or the learning approach that you take to actually address those challenges? Basically, here is the behavior that you show to achieve your objectives. Lastly, the third one, which is one of the most important elements, is quantify the results. Here, you have to use metrics, collect the data, and also here it's important to highlight your accomplishments, how you contributed with a team, include your work cross-functional, and it's important to use action verbs. And lastly, just be honest. Sometimes we need to have the balance review so that what you have done, but also you have to highlight your areas of development. Here it's really important because the data that you have here actually is a baseline to provide feedback. So overall, we want you to see this as an audit evidence, right? So when we have an audit, what the auditor asks, it's always, so you have the documents, what documents can you provide, what evidence, what metrics, how did you achieve this? That's basically what the auditor requests you to have, right? So when the auditor asks you the evidence, you don't give opinions, right? So basically here, the main important element is that in the self-assessment, you document and you do it fact-based instead of opinions. So just think about this as an audit request, right? So you collect information, you prepare yourself, and then you log into the system, you log into Staff Evaluator, and then you place those elements considering your key achievements, your challenges, but not your challenges per se, but also how you address those challenges. So you collect the data and then you balance the information, right? Again, here, it's important to highlight your areas of development because this is the key data for feedback. Now, we have the self-assessment part, but also you will be asked to get into the objective settings. At this point, what we're asking you is just to draft, to have in mind, to put this idea on the table, also to see what the future looks like, right? And again, we are going to consider 4 main steps into this part of the first phase. So one of the important points here is that all the objectives, the sweet spot, it would be between 3-6 objectives, is to align your objectives with CIMMYT strategy. That's basically the first point. Then the second point is actually how you are going to align those objectives with the CIMMYT strategy. Here's where it comes, the classic approach that we have been using over the years, which is the SMART approach. You may be familiar with it, which is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bounded. So this is the approach that we're going to recommend. Now, I will go for number 3 and number 4, and then I will stick a bit on how you can formulate your SMART objectives. So for number 3, and this is something that actually we are going to introduce today, those are development objectives. So here we want to shift what we have been asking before, like, okay, I want to have an Excel training course. But the way we see it now is that this is just only a task. It's not the outcome. So basically here, you have to tailor your development objectives to support your goals. And later on, we are going to explain what framework we can use to achieve this part. And lastly, and most important, is that once you have all this defined, and again, this is going to be just the initial thought, the draft option, and then you just can put those draft options into the system and go into Staff Evaluator and document those. So overall, you have to think about the future as well. So you also give your supervisor that the idea that you also see the big picture, aligning the objectives into the strategy. Now, let's go to check a bit of the SMART objectives. So how to formulate SMART objectives, right? So here, you know, the SMART objectives, and maybe here I'm just going to make a pause and I will ask on the chat, and then you can type the response. What does it mean, SMART objectives? Do you know what the S stands for? So then you just can go into the chat and click on there, what the S means. Any ideas what the S stands for? So here it says specific, right? That's correct. But here there are two important words that I want you just to remember. Exactly and important. So basically the question it would be, what will the objective accomplish? Why is it important to accomplish this objective? It has to be specific. Then again, I'm just going to ask you, what does the M stand for? You can type the answer on the chat. So measurable, right? So how will you know that this has been finished? Basically, it's what is the concrete benchmark or indicator that you know that this objective has been achieved. So think about the indicator that you are going to have in the objective. Now, for the next letter, that is the A, you can just type on the chat what A means. Right, achievable, right? So here, basically, the key question is how? How are you going to achieve? Is this a challenge possible to complete? Do you really have the resources to make it happen, right? So think of the A as the how you are going to achieve it. Then the next one, it's the R, right? So what does the R stands for? You just can go to the chat and then just type. So relevant, right? So here, actually, we're going to have the first limit here, relevant. So think about the strategy. Does this objective add value to the strategy? Does it contribute to the work that you have done within your team, within your department, within your program, within the organization? So think about adding value when you see relevant. And lastly, that's time bound, right? So basically, is when are you going to complete the objective? And here, just have in mind that setting the deadline starts creating accountability for the objectives that you are going to have. So overall, what we want to avoid when setting SMART objectives is not just writing donor funding, right? So that basically is not an objective. I will have some donor funding, right? So basically, it's just going to be so ambiguous. So here, what we're going to ask you actually for the donor funder objective is to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bounded. So overall, just to make a conclusion on how you can formulate the objectives. So instead of have new donors, so let's shift that into what you see there on the slide. I will acquire 3 new donors for my project within the 2 months by asking referrals, launching a social media campaign, and networking with local business and organizations. So here I will make a pause and let's analyze it and break down this objective. So in this example, then you just can go into the chat and then what is the specific part in this example? You can type on the chat what is the specific part in this example, in this objective. What is the keyword, how you can identify that is specific? Acquired 3 new donors. That's correct. So instead of having, and again, so have new donors. So let's shift that into, I will acquire 3. Actually, the specific part is the 3 donors, right? So then let's go for the next letter, measurable. So how do you know that this will be achieved? What's the benchmark, as I explained to you before? Right, so I'm seeing there, so 3 new donors, all right? So achievable. In the example, where do you see the achievable part? You can type on the chat. Campaigning, correct. Any other ideas to reflect the achievable section? Networking, that's correct. So basically, again, this is how you will do it, right? So how? Launching a social campaign, networking, right? And relevant. Where do you see the relevant part? You can type it on the chat. Working for the project, right? Any other ideas where you see it there? So here, that's basically the project funding, right? So that's actually what it is aligned with our core business. And lastly, the time-bound section, but that's very simple, right? So it's within 2 months. So instead of just having project funding as an objective, we want you just to think of this framework to be specific, remember exactly important, how you are going to measure what is the benchmark, the indicator, achievable, how you will make this happen? Relevant? How does it align with our strategy and the timeline? So that's basically what we are going to request you to have in the system. So overall, I'm just going to recap what we have seen so far for the self-assessment that you as a staff member need to complete by December 15. Basically, you have to complete your self-assessment, start drafting your initial thoughts on your objectives for next year, and when doing so, then you will use the SMART approach, remembering this framework. And now we are going to go through the next section, which is the development part. And for this, I will ask Deepu to take over.
Sure. Thanks, Daniel. Just by way of a quick introduction, as Sabrina briefly mentioned, so I lead CIMMYT's talent management function. So that essentially covers three broad pillars: recruitment, performance, and training. So performance is part of what me and my team lead. So I really look forward to working with each of you as we go through the performance evaluation cycle over the next 2-3 months. Just building off what Daniel mentioned. So we've looked at how you need to complete your self-review, focusing more on impact, not just the actions, and doing it in a way where it is evidence-based and documents the impact that you've delivered. We also spoke briefly about how to set SMART goals, at least a draft of your work objectives for the following year. That's something that you can revise with your supervisor, with your leadership over the next 2 months, but kind of have that locked down on the system right now. We'll talk about the third part of what you need to do on the staff evaluator, which is essentially to draft a set of developmental goals, so development objectives. What this does is it's a change for those of you who've been around. It's a change from what we've done in previous years. Usually what we have is a field that says training requests or training needs, and then you can type in a specific training program that you want to attend or something that you consider beneficial for you for your role. What we're doing here is a slight change. We are framing the training need as a development objective. And what essentially we want to do is to say that, okay, here is a specific action that helps you learn by doing. So typically it's a project or a task that stretches your current capability, helps you learn some new skill or new capability, and most importantly, it's linked to CIMMYT's mission or your team or your program's priorities. What we want to make sure is we focus not just on a specific training, but how that training leads to you building a skill capability that gets you towards a better outcome. So what you see here on the slide is really how we want you to think about your career. So each one of us own our own career. Our supervisor or manager is there to support and guide from the sidelines, but it's our duty to be proactive in terms of bringing to the discussion what your goals are, ideas that you have to discuss with your manager, to present and ask for the development that you want that can be built over time. So an example of, say, a development goal here, and we'll look at a couple of quick examples in a minute. So things to consider as we move on to the next slide. What a development goal is, it's a concrete action. It's usually a project task or a behavior that helps you stretch your capability. And as I mentioned, link that to CIMMYT's mission or team priorities. A few quick examples before we look at the examples. Another point that I want to highlight is using the 70-20-10 principle. What this means is 70% of what you learn is typically through on-the-job projects. So it can be a stretch assignment, it can be a job rotation, it can be an additional task that you take on that is not something that you usually do, but helps you learn a new skill. 20% of learning is typically through feedback, coaching, mentorship. Maybe you have a subject matter expert who can give you feedback and teach or coach you on how you're making progress on that aspect, and the last 10% being formal training, traditional training like trainings, e-learning courses, etc. So we want to start with the 70% first, learning on the job, and then move on to potentially feedback, coaching, having an ally or an expert who can give you feedback and guide you, and then the last 10 on formal training, and not the other way around. So that's the shift that we want to implement this year, and this is in line with best-in-class practices of how individuals learn in organizations effectively. If you look at the next slide in terms of where this helps us build capability. So this is just the first step. Development objectives is the first step that helps each employee build a development plan, and potentially that plan over time will lead to a new career pathway that you can forge for yourself. So I just want to highlight this. This is the first step that we're taking with an intentional output or direction that we want to move our employees towards career paths that they desire, career paths that they may not have clarity currently. So the more you demonstrate learning agility, the more you're able to drive clarity on your development objectives and how your supervisor can support, the faster your visibility is for future opportunities. So use this performance evaluation cycle not just to document and celebrate your contributions. Make sure that you also are able to ask for what you want in the future, being able to present that to your manager. So this is your opportunity to make sure that your growth opportunities are clearly identified and acted upon. We move on to quickly the next slide on examples. I just want to quickly touch upon a couple of examples. I know Daniel mentioned a few on the SMART goal side as well. So there's just a couple of examples here, and probably focus on, say, the second one here. So a cross-program project to improve data accuracy. So that's an objective. A way to say, so the objective broadly is around process efficiency and innovation. The way to have a measurable outcome, and this is something we will have on the Staff Evaluator tool, a demo that Daniel will do shortly. So let's say, so the intent is to improve, the objective is to improve operational efficiency. A measurable outcome for this could be, say, reduce processing time for one key workflow or process by, say, X% or by 15% by end of Q2. So that's an example of how you go from setting the development objective, adding a measurable outcome, and then mapping a specific action to it. An action could be that, okay, so in order for you to work on this, you can take on a stretch assignment that requires you to map all the current processes as is, identify pain points, and then pilot or recommend one improvement for relevant departments. So that's a mapping of objective, the outcome, and the action that we will set for each of these developmental goals. And this is something that we will track on Staff Evaluator. Where relevant, where necessary, there will also be a training component. But like I mentioned before, we want to start with the 70, 20, 10%. We don't want to start with just the training. We want to start with the goal, what you can do on the job, what kind of support you can get from supervisors or subject matter experts. And then if there's anything that we feel like this really benefits through formal training, we will have that component as well. So that's just a quick overview of the development objective component. And I want you to consider this as part of the overall mix performance review or the self-review, setting work objectives for 2026 and also the development objectives for 2026. I'll just pause here to check with Daniel if we want to do a quick demo as we move forward.
Right, Deepu, so I'm just going to have the screen of the system. So Staff Evaluator, so most of you are familiar with it. And we're going to have a recap of the 3 steps that you have to complete. So you have here actually the 3 steps. You have the self-assessment, work plan and objectives, and the proposed development goals. So overall into the system, once you log it into the system, you need to complete your self-assessment. So basically you will select, this is just sample data. So you select it, Then you will see the button there, edit objective. And here, just remember the 4 pillars, right? So reflect on your achievements, what you have done, how you overcome also your challenges, right? So please use data. Remember this analogy on the audit evidence that you need to show, right? And also let's balance that one, right? So what you have achieved and also what there may be some areas of development. So basically you complete the self-assessment here and then you click on save. And once it's done, well, we do it just as an example here. So I have just save, then it would be saving. If you don't finish one day, then you just can leave it there as a draft. So you edit again and then you save it. And once you're sure, once you say, okay, this is final, once you gather all the information, relevant information to give to your supervisor, then you click on this button, submit. There will be a notification part there, then you click OK. So your self-assessment has been submitted, right? So here you will see the change here, which it says submitted. So it means that you cannot change the self-assessment. That's going to be actually what your supervisor will see, right? So then the second part, it would be basically the objective settings. Again, this is just a draft, the initial, information. So then you can have a baseline on the conversation that you may have with the supervisor. And again, just we want to reinforce this. This is going to be just the initial part as a draft, right? Because actually, when you have the conversation with the supervisor, you may be aligning those, but just consider this phase as the draft for the objective settings. And then here, one of the most important elements that we want to introduce here and shift this mind of only request the training, not the task, but also to have the development goals. And again, just think of this framework, 70%, 20%, and 10%. So 70% on the job training, then 20% on how you collaborate, and then the 10% on the request, right? So, and also think about this as one of the expected behaviors that we have, and you mention it correctly, learn by doing, right? So actually that's one of the behaviors that we have in our strategy. So that's basically what we have to do into a system as a staff member, right? So the first phase will conclude this. So one of the suggestions is start collecting the evidence, right? So use or quantify your results, use the metrics that you may have, use the feedback that you have received, and then just record it into the system. So that's one of the first part. And then I will just move into the presentation. And for the next couple of minutes, 10 minutes, I believe, we are going to concentrate on the other part of the first phase one, which is actually the conversation. And in here, our objective is just to provide you with some tips so that we can turn into the conversation meeting into the conversation on development, which is actually our goal today. So here, let's say we have 4 steps, again, just for you to remember as a staff member. So the first thing is get your evidence ready, right? So again, let's go back to the metaphor that we have, the analogy that we have. Collect everything that you have in terms of data, documents, what you have achieved, most important, how you have achieved, right? And actually the value that you have provided into those objectives. Then the conversation, and you have to remember this as a staff member, it has to go into the 3 actually components that we have been discussing. The first thing, it has to be review the accomplishments, which translate into the self-assessment, right? Also the challenges that you have faced, and we have talked about it, so how you have overcome those challenges, if so, and areas of development. Here again, this is key data for providing feedback, right? So that's actually, in other words, so we normally say, what you can measure, then you can improve. So basically here, the feedback is what you are aware, then you can improve. So number 3, and again, we are going to come back to the objective setting for next year. So you just need to think about it. That's actually one initial request, just to put it as a draft. And also, you may be asking, and then you can link it with what actually DPUT has introduced about the development goals. So what are one of the 1, 2, even 3 skills that you want to improve, right? And finally, you may also be asking or clarifying the expectation of the roles. So what you can do differently, right, for next year. Or maybe then you can ask your supervisors, right? So maybe from now to 6 months, what competences should I demonstrate to achieve the goals? So then it will be leading to a conversation on development, more on just having the conversation part of performance evaluation. Overall here, I actually would like to think the performance conversation as a road trip, right? So in the road trip, you plan, right? You check where you are actually going to stop, right? And then you may be assigning some tasks. So you may be asking who is going to take care of the music, right? So who is going to take care of the snacks? So think about of the roadmap. So preparation for having this, having the evidence, structure the conversation into what you have achieved, the challenges, how you have overcome, write metrics, have as much as possible quantifiable results into the self-assessment, and start thinking about what it will come next into the future, having in mind our strategy and the objectives within your department or program, and also ask expectations for next year. So basically, that is how you can prepare yourself as a staff member so that then you can have a meaningful conversation with your supervisor. So into the conversation that you're going to have, one of the key elements is the feedback. But before going to the feedback, I actually want to highlight things that you may be avoiding when having the conversations. And then again, we have four key words for you to remember. So don't be ambiguous, right? So then don't close reception. Then do not blame others. And also, again, do not submit later your review. Again, we have set an ambitious deadline, but with the mind that it's better to have completed this one by December 15, because everything will be fresh, instead of completing this early next year and says, what did I did last year? So that's actually one of the reasons we want just to complete this one before Christmas, because you may be actually enjoying your holidays when you have actually completed all this. So key examples for these 4 options, right? So instead of having, I did a great job on this one, provide numbers, provide evidence. Again, I'm just coming back to the analogy of the audit request, right? So provide the numbers, provide the facts, how you are going to back up your achievements, right? And also use specific examples. And also focus on your actions, right? Focus on the areas of developments that you may have, so that then this is going to be key for the feedback part that we are aiming to have. And lastly, and most important, again, just start collecting your data, start collecting your evidence, and then go into the system and complete it before December. Actually, you may have a couple of weeks to complete it, so that then your supervisor can have enough time to complete the review by December 15. So I was telling you about the feedback as well, right? So feedback is the best tool for development. And I will come back again, and just for you to remember, feedback is the first step to get the data. And that data will help us to drive the development goals. Just to have the development goals, to have some measurable outcomes, and then to start actually planning how you will achieve those. And take feedback not as a criticism, but something that it will help us. That's the first step so that we can change this script of having, okay, so I'm just going to receive feedback so that I can improve, right? And again, I mentioned it a bit before, how you can do things differently. So what behaviors should I show to improve my performance? Right? So that is something that you have to take into consideration when you have actually the performance conversation with your supervisors. Basically here, the main key message is prepare yourself when you meet with your supervisor, right? So let's go to the next section. This is how the criteria on how the evaluations will be focused. And please, Deepu.
Sure, thanks, Daniel. So the three core principles that you see here. So if there's one slide that you walk away with after the session, it's probably this. I like to think of it as if somebody stops you in the hallway and says, okay, what's so different about CIMMYT's performance evaluation cycle this year? You should be able to say that it's strictly evidence-based. That's well-documented outcomes, behaviors. We apply consistent standards. So what that means is a rating evaluation, if somebody meets expectations in Zimbabwe, it's the same as meets expectations in India or Mexico. And the third being that we account for learning time and role. So we factor that into how we assess and evaluate performance. So these are the key principles that I would want each of you to keep in mind. And I'll briefly kind of reinforce that. So when we say it's evidence-based, and Daniel mentioned about this in a fair amount of detail. Look at concrete examples. There's different ways in which you can do that. Make sure you're able to record the rationale of how you're documenting that. Think of it like an audit, an example that Daniel mentioned as well. I just want to spend a little bit of time on the ratings. So what you see on the next slide is the 5 ratings that we have at CIMMYT. If we can move on to the next slide. Sorry. Yeah. So I like to use a quick non-work example here. So everybody's familiar with the 5 ratings that we have. So let's start with an example of, say, you go to a restaurant and you get a case of food poisoning. So that's something that it's not just about, okay, bad food and I want to complain. It's more of a case of you never want to go back there and it's a clear performance failure. So that would be something that's synonymous with, say, below expectations, if we were to kind of think of it in terms of a performance rating. Now, let's say you go to a restaurant and the food arrives a bit cold. Maybe the service is a little slow sometimes, but at least it's edible. So that's a scenario of like, okay, I'll go to this restaurant if there's literally no other option because there's inconsistent performance that often needs fixing. So that would be something that, again, is kind of maps to say partially meets expectations. Take another scenario where you maybe go, the food is good at the restaurant, the service is fine, it delivers what is promised every time. This is sort of your go-to lunch spot even. It's reliable, it's trusted, and you know that it kind of meets what your expectations are. So that's typically with the rating that we say, okay, this fully meets expectations. Now, let's say you go to the restaurant and the food is great. It's the chef personally comes and checks in at the table, and you want to really recommend this restaurant to your friends, your family. So this is an example of going beyond the basics consistently and making sure that the experience is much better than expected consistently. So that would be exceeding expectations. And I know we've all been to a restaurant that we go maybe like once a year. Say you book the table weeks ahead. Maybe it's like a special anniversary or a birthday event. And when you show up, everything is exceptional. The food, the service, atmosphere, and it almost sets the standard for other restaurants to aspire to. That would be something that truly must be celebrated. That would be outstanding. So think of this example as sort of the 5 levels of how we want to rate performance and kind of see where you are able to self-assess or place yourself. So outstanding is typically about transformative results. So think about, have I delivered transformative results that's at the program level or country level or perhaps even system level? So that is, it's not just about performance in general. It's not just about the effort, but it's about measurable, exceptional outcomes. So outstanding is typically somebody who's a game changer. So when you reflect on your performance, if you feel like, okay, what I do or what I've done over the past year is game changing, document that and then have that discussion. Um, the exceeds expectations, it's typically strong performance, but a strong stretch performance that's consistently above your own job scope. So it adds value over what your regular scope of duties are consistently throughout the year. So that's a way to kind of add some specificity to that. You consistently raise the standards for the performance across the team that you're part of. And fully meets expectations. This is sort of the organizational standard or the norm. We expect most of us to kind of be able to meet this or kind of sit in this category, so to speak. So this is solid, reliable performance. You can be relied upon, dependable, and it's something that that there is consistently meets, or you get what you. If you kind of think about the restaurant example, you get what you pay for. Is this good? There's no surprises. Um, when you feel like, okay, I've delivered on goals, but sometimes I needed a lot of targeted guidance, or it slipped below the threshold, but I was able to recover. So if that's kind of how you're able to assess your performance, then that probably is around the partially meets expectations. So document that again, have an open, honest conversation with your supervisor on what you can do to move from strength to strength over the next year. And if you feel like you're struggling, this constantly unable to deliver on goals, make sure you capture that. The support we offer for partially meets or below expectations is the option to have a documented improvement plan or a performance improvement plan. Now, this is something that we offer as a intentional tool to make sure that employees have the support they need to get back on track to, say, a fully meets, which is sort of the organizational standard. So make sure that you do an honest reflection of your work and contributions and are able to have that conversation with your supervisor. So the spirit of this discussion is not a negotiation or a disagreement, but it's more to do with alignment. And you ideally, the supervisor, and I know some of you are supervisors on this call as well, apart from being staff members yourself, you need to be able to walk into that conversation, and it shouldn't be a surprise. It should be, okay, we're just going to get alignment and reconfirmation and what we've already agreed on and are on the same page throughout the course of the year. That's the ideal way to approach the discussion and the outcome that you want to walk away with. If there are disagreements, then I think that's an opportunity for you as a staff member and your supervisor to make sure you're on the same page throughout the course of the year. A few ways of being able to do that outside of just the performance evaluation meeting that's annual is to document the conversation via email. So let's say once a month or once in 2 months, you ask for feedback or you share your assessment of how you're trending, and your manager says, yes, I agree, or I agree on these 3 points, or this one thing, this is how I see it. Just a short email to document that, either as a staff member or as a supervisor, I think helps add clarity and some evidence to how performance is trending over the year. So just moving on to the last part of the 3 principles, the first being evidence-based, consistent ratings that we apply, and the third is accounting for learning time. So if you're new in the role or received a promotion, so I'm new to Sumit myself, so I'm new in the role, I'm still learning, growing, adjusting. So factor that in when you look about when you think about, okay, what is the impact that I've delivered, or where my performance stands. We want to make sure that we focus on development as much as we focus on the kind of a retrospective view of past performance and rating. So there's just a few key takeaways that we want to share with you. I know we're coming up on time. I just want Daniel to maybe quickly walk us through some of the uh, reminders or checklist of sorts, and hopefully we can take a couple of questions as well.
Thank you, Deepu. And basically, the session is coming to the end, and we're going to have just a recap of what we have been explaining to you. And basically, think of audit evidence. Actually, when you as a staff member are filling up your self-assessment, so put data, put facts, right? If it's not documented, it means it didn't happen. So we need to achieve here, instead of thinking about the effort, think about the impact and the added value that you have provided. So please consider, as Deepu was saying, so those three principles that, or the criteria that we're going to use, right? So ratings should be documented. So apply the ratings descriptions consistently, meaning fully meets expectation is the same in Zimbabwe, Mexico, Bangladesh, India, right? And learning time counts. So if you are new in the role, please consider that you are in the learning and adjustment phase, right? So you drive your development, right? So think about the lens of 70-20-10. So learn by doing, that's actually one of the behaviors that we have on the projects. Think about how you can collaborate. That is actually the social learning. And lastly, let's focus on the training itself, right? The typical courses that we already know, right? So overall, think of all these, and I just want to use one of the items I mentioned at the beginning of the session. Think this as a Lego thing, right? So the earlier you place the first brick, the smoother the entire structure will come together. So thank you.
So there's a quick question in the chat. So I'm just going to quickly read that out for everybody's benefit. So sometimes there's differences in the rating between the first level supervisor and the final rating. Clarify how much priority is given to the first level supervisor's assessment and what factors are considered when adjustments are made. Sabrina, do you want to take that? Or
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, indeed, this is something that that we have noticed in a way that our system functions. So what is going to be really important this year is, right now the way our system functions is that the first level supervisor enter their rating, and then when the second level supervisor enter the rating, it overruled the first rating that the first level supervisor has put. So what we've asked it through as well, the presentation last week to the supervisors, and it's for this first level supervisors and the second level supervisor to have a talk before finalizing that final rating that the second level supervisor will put in. So it is really important that the two supervisors talk together so that the final rating represents both views together and not separate. Next year, this something that will be changed, but for this year, it's important, as they've explained through this presentation today, but also last week, is that you have the conversation with your first level supervisor. The first level supervisor agree on that final rating so that that final rating is in line with both on both sides. So that's really what needs to happen.
A quick, thanks, Sabrina. A quick comment I just want to add is we typically don't want the rating to be communicated in when you have a one-on-one with your employee. So if you're a staff member or a supervisor, the one-on-one conversation, make sure you focus on the themes, what you're doing well, what can be better, what's the plan for the future. The rating should only be communicated at the final part of the process and not in between. The second thing is, in terms of the criteria, what is considered, essentially think of it as the manager is at the ground level, closer to the detail, the first level, and the second level supervisor is at a much higher vantage point. They're able to see across teams, across team members in different units. So that's really the benefit of having both of them view. So let's say you live in, say, Mexico City, and there's 10 Italian restaurants, and you're rating them as best 1, 2, 3. But then you speak to another friend of yours who's maybe traveled across 15 countries globally and has experience of going to like 100 different Italian restaurants. Their input again now makes you reconsider or change things slightly if you get additional data or perspective. So that's the same principle we apply here. Some stuff might be finished. Do we need to performance review? So I think there's one on timeline. Sorry, go ahead, Sabrina.
Yeah, and this one I want to take that on board. I hear this question, and I think no matter what happens at the end of December, and if this is the case, then it's always important that you have an outcome, right, of the year that you've just worked on, so that you know what that performance has been, and you take that with you, right, into wherever that next step in your career will be. So it's still important to actually know and to have that feedback to conclude the year. So I'd say it's important to still fill up the performance, to still go through the process as much as you can, so that you have an outcome for your own self, right? And so you can take that with you moving forward.
Yes, yes.
There's a last question that says, how can we include achievements that go beyond our set objectives? It's in Daniel. Yeah, maybe.
So I think if I understand the question, I think there's a work objective, and then you write a summary of what I achieved. But if there's maybe achievements that's not directly linked to a work objective, how do you capture that? A quick input, and Daniel, feel free to add in. So you can take the closest related work objective and then add a description in your self-review to say this was the initial objective, but there were changes based on project discussions, a scope or opportunity, and here's a new objective that I ended up working on. You can capture that, document that in the self-review component. So pick the one that's closest to that, or describe how you got to that from the existing objectives. Obviously, Daniel, Sabrina, if you want to add to that.
Yes, Deepu, and basically here you can make the reference in the closest objective, and please have in consideration what else you have achieved and how you have achieved it, right? So basically, what was how you do it to become or to have that outcome.
Yeah, the same I would say with the question around new objectives assigned by the project leader as well. Make sure you're able to document that with context, saying, hey, this was not assigned, but it's something that I worked on, and here is the X percentage time that I spent. So document that, even if the fields don't add to it. It's also an opportunity to constantly refine next year's goals. So you will be setting that in before end of December, but work through January, February, March to consistently discuss with your first level, with your second level, saying, are there changes you anticipate? How much of leeway do I have in updates? So make sure you have those 2-3 iterations of conversations. So at least for 2026, there isn't a huge shift in terms of the objectives that are set going forward. So, all right, I know we're over time. We'll probably take 1 or 2 questions. Again, we are available outside of this meeting, this discussion. So we are here to address your questions, work with you. Danny and I will be setting up a couple of touch points over the next 2 months as well, both for staff members and supervisors, in terms of a working session or a short open house where you can come in, maybe do part of the evaluation or have questions. So please know that this is not a one touch point and then you don't hear from us for the rest of the cycle. So we are here to support, and we will guide you through the evaluation cycle. All right.
Thank you.
If there are no other...
Thank you very much. Yeah, I wanted to thank you, Daniel and Deepu, for this insightful presentations. I hope this brought some values and brought value to you guys to understand how you're going to move forward in doing the performance evaluation this year. And again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to support you. I know that when there are new items or the SMART objectives are not necessarily easy to deal with on how to write them as well. So any questions, please reach out. Thank you. and have a wonderful evening, end of day for you all.